What's up everyone, Lion Roar here, and we have a brand new clan in Bloodline Heroes of Lithis. It is the Nared Crown clan. So of course, I'm going to do a full breakdown, talk about what traits are going to be good on them, team synergy, things like that. So let's just dive in. But first, download Bloodline Heroes of Lithis, a mobile RPG action fighting game where you can marry your champions to create new and unique hybrids. Use the link in the description to start with some free stuff, including gold and diamonds. See you hopefully soon. Alright, so as usual, we're going to take a look at the clan trait first, and just note that this is an epic hero because the event just started, so I did the event to get the epic hero, and these numbers are going to be higher the rarity of the champions that you get. So the clan trait is called Tidal Corrosion, and it says each normal attack reduces the enemy's damage by some percent, which actually goes up to 10% for level 22 traits, lasting for 4 seconds, stacking up to 3 times. So if you do the math, you could potentially reduce damage by 30% of the champion that this individual champion targets, or whoever has the trait. So of course the male does the same thing, or whoever you want to put this clan trait on. Now I actually think this is a pretty good clan trait. It's probably not one to chase and go put on every hero, but for the champions that they're on, I think that it's a really good one. And there are probably some, and in fact, there's probably future champions that they come out with where potentially they could hit even more people. I don't know. I can't fathom what they're going to come up with in the future, but hitting more opponents, more enemies to be able to get more out of this potentially too. So just store this clan trait in the back of your mind, because I think it is actually a good one. It will impact the battlefield, and there's the potential for some crazy cool synergies in the future. Now let's take a look at the skills, and we're going to take a look in the renowned champion section so that we can see all of these at level 15. I always like to look at the passive first, which affects the battlefield first. Then we'll look at the active skill and the ultimate. And by the way, these are rogues. Or I should say assassins, kind of the same thing, not really, but kind of. These are assassins, and that usually means that what they specialize in is really focusing on taking out one enemy at a time. A lot of these like to target the backline, which is hard for all the other champions to reach. So we're going to see if that holds true here. The passive for the male is Sonic Breaker. After every other normal attack, play the instrument to send a sound wave into the target's direction, dealing 250% strength damage to all enemies in its path. Adding a layer of Tide for 5 seconds. When an enemy reaches 3 Tide stacks, deal 350% strength damage as true damage, stunning the target for 1 second, while the caster recovers Constitution equal to 70% of the damage dealt and clears all Tide from the target. Tide effect can be dispelled, and if the target has Tide, their Constitution recovery is reduced by 50%. I'm going to be honest, it's easy to miss that last sentence, and that's actually, to me, probably the most exciting part of the passive. Because when Constitution recovery is slowed down like that, you're reducing the effect of the male water and suns that are out there. Now, I think this passive could be stronger, and if they're really trying to balance male water and sun's just absolutely meta owning effect, then I want to see this be true for more than just the target. I would like to see it be more of an area of effect type of thing. But it's fine, it's getting there, and if it happens to hit the opposing male water and sun, then it actually makes that male water and sun easier to kill too. So this is a really strong passive. In fact, the passives that they've been coming out with lately are getting stronger and stronger, which is really good for those event types where you don't get to use ultimate skills. Okay, let's take a look at the active. Tideblade Rain. Keep playing the instrument, rapidly firing 4 guaranteed to hit throwing knives at the weakest enemy on the field, each knife dealing 250% strength damage, inflicting 1 stack of Tide. So we get some more Tide here. And it's rare we see hits that are guaranteed, so keep that in mind, especially with all the dodge that exists out there. If the target is within the caster's domain, the knife's damage is increased by 30%. So now, along with the trait, which is potentially reducing the damage of your opponents, and here you're increasing your own damage. That creates a lot bigger effect than it sounds when you just read the specials. And the ultimate, Submersion Tremor. Dive rapidly underground, then surge up in the same position as the weakest enemy champion, knocking nearby enemies to cause 450% damage to the caster's strength. That's really cool, and you're probably going to want to clump your opponents together in one spot. So again, I mean, I'm just famous for talking about female Tide Raiser all the time, who just seems to be really good at that, but there are others, of course, as well. The caster then slams the ground upon landing, dealing 500% damage. That's 500% more damage on top of the 450% of coming out of the ground. And that's of the caster's strength to area enemies, expanding the domain for 6 seconds. Enemies within the domain during this time will gain a tide stack every 1 second. And if an enemy casts an ultimate within the domain, the caster immediately refreshes their active skill cooldown. Domain disappears upon the caster's death. You know what? This one's a little hard to read in how good it's going to be, but it has all the elements I like to see. As far as like, there's a lot of damage and there's a little bit of control in here too. But this looks like a guy that's just built to deal a lot of damage. And unlike the other assassins that we typically see in Bloodline, he's not just going after one opponent. Like, he is, but he's also dealing a good bit of area of effect damage around that enemy too. That's why it would be really good to consider clumping your enemies together as best as possible to really take advantage of that. And I think that there's the chance he could be a really big PvP damage dealer. I'm not sure. Like, he's probably okay PvE, but it seems to me like PvP is where he's going to be a bit stronger. And so let's take that into consideration. As far as traits go, you know, we're seeing a lot of strength usage here. So of course, we're talking brutal. I always like agile because just faster attacks. It's one of the only clan traits that wasn't really like nerfed down to the first 10 or 15 seconds of the match. So you've got that. And then I always like to have Pure Heart if there's Balco in the meta. But you could also use like Honorable as a way to prevent damage from being taken. So we're in the vanilla trait meta. And so a lot of just the original good old boring traits are some of the best ones in this day and age. We'll just have to see as more clan traits come out. But in an effort to make sure that clan traits weren't going to overtake everything, they kind of dumbed them down. They just did it a little too much. So now just the regular traits are better than a lot of those. Okay, let's take a look at the female now. All right, so her passive, Abyssal Echo. If no enemies are nearby, the caster will be in trance. In trance, the caster will chant and cast knives among enemies. Periodically inflict 160% damage to the caster's strength, inflicting 1 stack of immersion, lasting for 10 seconds up to 7 layers, which can be dispelled. When immersion reaches its max, the effect will be removed from the target, causing true damage equal to 15% of the target's max constitution. I always love to see that, especially for PvE. And it's capped at 2000% caster's strength, while also shattering all of the target's strength resistance for 5 seconds. These are a lot of the sort of tag words that I like to hear, and it's all in a passive. Anytime you see dealing damage based on some percent of a target's max constitution, that's usually going to be pretty good. And the only time it's really not good is if you're in PvP where the opponent has focused a lot more on like honorable and shields for survivability rather than like energetic or constitution. So, you know, keep that in mind. But it really shines against bosses. So PvE, this is screaming great PvE hero already. And there's a couple of traits here it's really begging for as well. One of them being brutal because the damage is capped at strength. So you need brutal in something like this. All right, Blade Surge. Caster periodically empowers self, increasing 25% strength and 20% crit rate for 10 seconds. Each instance of knife-caused damage during the state prolongs its duration by 0.5 seconds, up to a maximum of 10 additional seconds. This effect triggers once every 20 seconds. So interestingly, it's sort of just the active skill is basically just enhancing the passive. And then the ultimate, Blade Stealth, this is some of the fewest words I've seen on an ultimate in a while. Blade Stealth strengthens self, ignoring surrounding enemies for the next 8 seconds while considered in trance, becoming not targetable. During this time, command 2 additional knives with each knife's damage increased by 30%. So again, the ultimate is really just enhancing what the passive is already doing. So she just ramps up what she's doing as the match goes on. And I think there's a big question mark on how good this is actually going to be. And that question mark is going to depend entirely on if Agile makes the blades go faster, right? So if Agile actually does affect the speed at which the blades are hitting your opponents, the knives, I should say, then this could be a really, really, really good champion. It could be great, absolutely amazing in PvE, and pretty good in PvP as well. I think you'd probably have to play around with her because she's very different and see where she fits in. And I feel like this was true of the last clan too, where the female was either gonna be like awesome or she's gonna suck. But we gotta test her out. The wording on these specials could be a little bit clearer to help us understand what's going on. There's a lot of new like tag words and stuff in there too that we're gonna have to watch the animation. We're gonna have to break it down and look at the stats and the data that comes up after the matches to see how she's actually doing. But I'm really curious about her. Honestly, I'd like to test both. I really would like to test both. And I think that they both have the potential to be pretty good. I think that female NEREID is the higher likelihood to be hit or miss. And she's either going to be like awesome and better than the male or just not worth your time. And the male is solid. So, you know, it depends how many resources you have, but if you're somebody who's adventurous, feel free to level both up somewhat. Remember, if you reset it, you get a lot of those resources back. Of course, you don't get the champions that you fed them back, but you get a lot of the gold and spell books back and stuff like that. So feel free to play around with both and just see which one feels better in the lower level testing, and we can kind of go from there. That's what my plan is. We'll see how it goes. Let me know in the comments what you think about these champions, especially as you start to test them. I'm sure the community would appreciate seeing your thoughts in the comments. If you enjoy videos like this, make sure to like, subscribe, and hit that bell notification, and I will catch you in the next one.